Gators Breakdown episode 35 is live. Thanks for joining me. I'm David Waters, your host here on Gators Breakdown. Episode 35, like I mentioned, we're going to take a couple looks at some recruits and go from there. Recruiting season's definitely getting hyped up. Bowl game's been played, season is over, signing day is just around the corner, about a month away. So, a couple of recruits I'll be taking a look at today. Kemore Gamble, tight end, and offensive lineman Kadeem Telfort. And we'll talk a little bit about recruiting before, it always just gets kind of crazy before these official visit weekends start. The dead period is over. We'll start to hear a lot more as far as recruiting goes when these official visits take place. Florida will definitely be busy over the next 3 weeks. And of course, coaching hires are probably still to be made as well. We know about Randy Shannon, so there's an opening there. We'll see what happens with maybe something to do with Mike Summers and Greg Nord. See if Florida's. We have all heard the Mike Locksley rumors from Alabama. Can they bring him back to Gainesville from his Zook days? Will Mike Locksley be a Gator? We'll see. As is this podcast, he is not on staff yet. And it seems like it will happen if you read the tea leaves out there. But as of now, he's not there. So how much will a lot of people think he will be the recruiting coordinator when he comes in. So we'll see how that takes shape and if he's hired. But will not stop us talking about some recruits that we already know will be on campus. Some early entries for Florida, not as many as they had last year, but two big ones coming in. This week, tight end Kemore Gamble, Kadeem Telfort, those two, will be able to go through spring practice, as we know, as early enrollees. And I think you look for Gamble to maybe make a statement to maybe get some playing time next season with his athleticism. So I'll start with him. And as I mentioned, this is Gators Breakdown. Before I start with him, you can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes. Subscribe there if you don't mind. Share it. Leave a review. Share this podcast if you want people to hear some Gator talk. Is it slow down a little bit out there, but we're not going to slow down here on Gators Breakdown. Recruiting season, spring practice. We'll do some neat things when the summer rolls around, heading into next football season. So all those avenues there, you can find Gators Breakdown. And I'm David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And you can find Gators Breakdown on Facebook and on Twitter under those names, Gators Breakdown. So Kemore Gamble, I mentioned he's an early enrollee for the Gators. He was ranked as the number 1 tight end in the state of Florida and a 4-star recruit by every service out there. He kind of started out as a wide receiver before he kind of filled that frame out. He continued to grow where he's now 6'4", 243 pounds. Very, very good size. For a high school senior coming into Gainesville, that size, 6'4", 243. I'm telling you, that's a good size for a tight end and for this Gators. And just 2 years ago, his sophomore year, he was 6'2", 200 pounds. Hit that growth spurt to where he's now grew 2 inches, put some more pounds on. He's about 25 pounds heavier. He transferred to Miami Southbridge Senior High School those final 2 years as well. So as he was growing, he was at Miami Southbridge Senior High School for those 2 years. Cincinnati was the first school to offer him, but as soon as he started blowing up, kind of getting that size on, every big school came his way. Bigger names followed. We had 25 offers altogether. He was initially committed to Miami, and you're going to hear this a lot from this recruiting season for these Gators about how a lot of recruits were really interested in Miami, were committed to Miami at one time, and these Gator staff were led by Randy Shannon and recruiting coordinator Hova. We know, those guys are going to dominate South Florida. So we know what Florida's going to do there, I think, going forward with that. So, Kemore Gamble is one of those guys. Like I mentioned, he was committed to Miami, but when they fired Al Golden, couldn't remember his name there. When they fired Al Golden and hired Mark Richt, Kemore Gamble started looking around a little bit more, and he later pledged to the Gators. Florida withstood a late push from Alabama, so I think that speaks to something. Kind of a couple times now that Florida has done that with, I think, Jeremiah Moon and now LaMichael P. Ryan last year. So Florida able to hold off Alabama for some guys. So now he's, like I mentioned, he's an early enrollee. So what does he bring to the field? He's a big receiver, and he can be a receiving type of tight end, or Florida with his athleticism, we can see him out wide a little bit. He's a big wide receiver if you want him to be that as well. He's very, very athletic. But he'll be more of a tight end than he will be a big wide receiver. He has great length, really knows how to adjust to the ball. You watch his tape, and that's the one thing I've noticed that these coaches have done in this recruiting cycle with the receivers they've recruited, got committed in Daquan Green and now Gamble. These guys know how to adjust to the ball, and they know how to go get it. They know how to catch the ball, and gives their quarterbacks a good target. You get the ball near them, they're going to catch it. Gamble is not the fastest guy, but he has those long strides where it probably may not look like he's running fast as he is, but he can with his stride, he can cover some ground. So the big thing, and we saw it in the bowl game with DeAndre Goolsby, you can see Gamble in his tape. He likes to block, and if you go out there and read up on him and do some interviews with the coaches and stuff, he mentioned how he likes to block and he likes to finish blocking. So we saw DeAndre Goolsby struggles in the bowl game against Iowa, where he was lost as a blocker at tight end. So when Goolsby's on the field, he's more of a pass catcher. So if Gamble can come in and get on the line and show that he can block as well as catch, it may get him on the field a little bit earlier than we think. Yes, we know we got some good playmakers in Keontae Lewis, who late in the season just seemed to drop almost everything his way. And we know DeAndre Goolsby can make something happen after the catch, but he can't block. So if Gamble can come in right away and show the willingness to block, do a good job at it, and catch the ball, he might be a guy you throw into the red zone, where he maybe can go up, use his athleticism to make some plays. So I think, if you kind of, Jim McElwain likes these tight ends, and he likes to use those tight ends. I think you can go back to last year when Jake McGee was on the team and how he was used. When Will Grier was at quarterback, these Florida tight ends were lethal. They were a big time weapon for this Gator offense. So I think you go back and look at how Jim McElwain used Jake McGee, how we've used DeAndre Goolsby and Keontae Lewis. In this offense, they're open down the seam a lot, so you got to get a quarterback that can hit them down the seam, not necessarily everything short like we kind of saw it this year. We didn't really see the tight ends catch mini balls downfield. It was, probably 10, 15-yard routes, sometimes even shorter than that, and trying to make something happen after the catch. If in Jim McElwain's offense, what he wants from these tight ends, if he has a quarterback that can do it, these guys to take advantage down the field, use their speed in mismatches against the defense, and hit something down the field. And Kemore Gamble gives every opportunity with his size and his athleticism to do that for these Florida quarterbacks. So, we know these young quarterbacks will, if Gamble can come in, they'll have a target for a good bit of years going there with him. So let's move to the other early entry that's coming in. Offensive lineman Kadeem Telfort. He was a 4-star recruit from the historic Booker T. Washington High School down again in Miami. Has been a Gators commit for a while, since July 2015. Another one that has flipped from Miami. So I mentioned you were going to see and catch this pattern of Miami commits who have flipped to Florida. Back then, when he was committed to Miami, he was only a 3-star prospect out of Norland High School. He ranked 27th best offensive tackle prospect nationally by 24/7, drawing 20 scholarship offers. It's the biggest thing I think you'll notice, and if you watch some tape, if you see this guy in person, he's huge, 6'6", 323. He has the stature, he has the bulk, he has the frame to be an offensive tackle at a good school like Florida. He can probably come in right away and probably play right tackle Not sure he has enough athleticism to play left tackle. It will probably be easier to end up moving him to right tackle, to back up Jawan Taylor. Later in his career, we know Jawan Taylor got some years left here, but at least Florida will have some options now. There's some, you go and look at the offensive line situation from when Jim McElwain was brought in to where he really couldn't even hold a spring game because of numbers. And these numbers are much different now with Telfort coming in. So, these offensive linemen are not having to ask to come in and just be a body. We can train these offensive linemen now. Offensive line coach Mike Summers, as of now, can spend some time with them. These guys don't have to be thrown into the fire. They can get their legs behind them. They can get in the weight room. They can add some weight, and that's what we're going to see here with Telfort. He made major strides every year, all the way to his senior season, from his sophomore to junior to senior. When the spotlight was on him, we've seen him get better. So you like to see that progression. I think that's he still has a lot to learn. He's still very raw. As I mentioned, Florida's got to be patient. He's not going to come in and be a Jawan Taylor or a Martez Ivy, I don't think, because he's very raw. He's got everything you want, I think, besides just being very raw. He's going to need some time to come along. Mentioned he'll play offensive tackle. He has a mean streak to him. That's the one good thing that this Florida offensive line needs. Maybe that gets him on the field early. Maybe his mean streak. We've heard Jim McElwain in the Outback Bowl post-game press conference about how he was saying Florida's going to get tougher up front. Florida needs to get tougher up front. Jim McElwain sees it, so you could tell with this style of recruit that he's bringing in, Telfort, you watch his tape, he plays until the whistle blows. He will drive a guy into the ground. He will stand over him. He will talk some trash. You want that from your offensive line. So he's physically blessed with everything you want in an offensive tackle, but like I mentioned, he's raw. You got to put all this together for him. His biggest strengths, I think, if you look at it, and you go and look at some stuff from scout.com, his arm length, his frame, and I mentioned his intensity. I mean, you watch that tape. I mean, that's the first thing that comes out to me. He's mean, and I can't stress enough how much this Florida offensive line needs that. And of course, I mentioned another strength is his size. I mean, you don't see many guys this size, 6'6", 323, coming out of high school. So he's got everything you want in an offensive tackle coming out of high school. So what we want to see is, I like to see some more, pass blocking from him. You don't see as much as you want in the high school level with pass blocking. That's kind of what I mean by when I say he's raw. Martez Ivy was kind of that same way coming in. Even though he's a 5-star recruit, his style of offense that he came from in Apopka, he was asked to run block 95% of the time. They didn't pass the ball. Now Telfort has more experience in it, but still raw at it. So that's why I think he can come in, take his time. There's no need to rush him on the field. There's no need to rush these new offensive linemen coming in. This is not Alex Leatherwood type that Florida should have gotten, but these guys can come in, take their time, and get better. So as I mentioned, his pass protection, his technique, he can get a little bit better at. So he needs to get his technique down. I think he needs about a year to adjust, but the Gators have shown a knack to play some freshman offensive line. So, we don't get to see it much with this Florida team, and I'll mention it again with some other guys. You would like to see some blowouts when they play next season, so you can get more young guys some more playing time. That's kind of been a bugaboo for Florida, is when with this offense in the last couple of years, you're not blowing teams out. So a lot of young guys don't get experience unless people get hurt. It's paid off a little bit for Florida with the injuries up front, but you'd rather see these young guys get playing time because you're blowing teams out, not because it's a close game and you're having to play guys because they're taking over for injured players. So as I mentioned, the numbers have been better in the past on the offense. The numbers are better now than they were in the past in the offense, so there's no need to force these guys. We know David Sharp left. He declared. I don't think that necessarily means Florida's in trouble number-wise among the offensive line. When you look at, Martez Ivy, Fred Johnson, Brett Hagee, TJ McCoy, Tyler Jordan, Kavaris Harkless, Jawan Taylor, these guys, Florida has Nick Buchanan, Brandon Sandifer. Now, some of these guys may transfer, and then, we'll see. Not all of these offensive linemen are going to probably stay. Stone Forsyth, Richard Desir Jones, Antonio Riles may get moved to the other side of the ball. Andrew Mike as well, another maybe transfer candidate. So a lot better when you can list those offensive linemen than better than it used to be. Like, as I mentioned, you don't have 5 or 6 guys where you're having trouble holding the spring game. We'll see these young guys in the spring game. That's the changes Jim McElwain has made. The numbers at wide receiver, the numbers at offensive lineman are much better. So we'll see these guys are early enrollees, and we'll see Telfort in the spring. Maybe he surprises. Maybe he can come in and the light dings, and he's another offensive lineman Florida can count on. But I think it would be nice for him to come in, get a red shirt, put a year between him and these other young offensive line, and you have one that can, make it through some more years for these Gators. So, Gators Breakdown. Thank you guys for listening. We'll, like as I mentioned, we'll keep these things going with these recruiting profiles in this recruiting season. There's a lot more big names to talk about. Florida may be having coming in. Can they flip some guys? They're 50-50 for a lot of guys. A lot of guys have been making some decisions on these official visits before signing day and on signing day. So let's take a look at some names. The big names that are out there that we know Florida will be going after, that Florida is in good shape for, and kind of halfway shape for, and we'll see what these guys may do. I think the big one, you guys know if you follow it enough, Christopher Henderson out of Miami, another South Florida, another Miami kid. So it's he's still committed to Miami. A lot of people, majority, think he flips Florida to Florida. Cornerback that Florida can definitely use after the departures of Tease Tabor and Quincy Wilson. So the opportunity will be rightly available for him to come in, prove himself, and get on the field early. That's probably the biggest selling point Florida can give him. Come in, play early, and you can be the next Vernon Hargrave. You can be the next Tease Tabor. You can be the next Quincy Wilson. That's the biggest selling point. What any program in the nation can do right now is the Florida DB spot, DBU. So more than likely, that's the big selling point for Henderson, and he probably ends up a Gator. Another wide receiver, James Robinson, out of Lakeland. He sets to visit Florida, I think this weekend, with trips to Alabama, Ole Miss to follow. We think Oklahoma is probably the biggest threat to James Robinson. But, going after and looking at the Under Armour game, and you talk to some people there and you hear some whispers for some other players that James Robinson is going to be a Gator more than likely. So it's kind of surprising. Oklahoma's the biggest threat, but they showed a lot of love. Florida didn't necessarily show a lot of love early because there were some grade issues, maybe some other off-the-field issues with Robinson, but a lot of those seem to be cleared up. Florida has put on the full court press lately. It would be another big receiver Florida can use. He's one of those who can come in right away as a freshman and make some plays. So Florida can they sell James Robinson in with this offense to come in and play for the Gators. So keep going. Another Michigan commit, another offensive lineman, Kyleon Herbert. We talked to people. Seems to be another Florida lean, even though he's committed to Michigan right now. 6'4", 280. Florida and Miami are considered to be the front runners there. It looks like he wants to stay close to home instead of being committed to Michigan. That could change, but if you go by what you hear, Herbert looks like he wants to stay close to home. Looks like Florida leads the way there. It would be another big-time offensive lineman for Florida. Another 4-star there. So Florida's, while I mentioned they have better numbers, they're also this cycle. And I know Mike Summers gets a lot of flack, but TJ Moore, Kadeem Telfort, maybe Kyleon Herbert. I mean, you're just setting up yourself for a pretty good offensive line haul. If you're the Gators, you also got to look at to Daryl Slayton in that position as well. He can play offensive line or defensive line. Another 4-star, another high quality player. Florida's getting players in on the offensive line. I know Mike Summers gets a lot of flack, but not this cycle. This cycle, I know they missed out on Alex Leatherwood. The situation there, he was pretty much going to flip to Florida until, of course, Saban got word of it. And you can read the tea leaves. You can think what you want to think about that situation. But Alex Leatherwood was very, very close to being flipping to the Gators. And then all of a sudden, that didn't happen. And he ended up staying committed to Alabama. But as I mentioned, offensive line to Daryl Slayton's going to be in that mix coming up. More people think he's coming to Florida. He dominated at the Army game on both sides of the ball, offensive line and defensive line. So if you think Florida's bringing in too many offensive linemen this cycle, don't worry. They can shift him to the defensive line if that's where he'd rather play, if that's where his biggest impact will be made. I think Florida can sell him on that. They're going to sell him on playing the defensive side of the ball if he wants to. But Florida can use him on either side of the ball. Safety, Brad Stewart, also out of New Orleans. It's hard to pull those Louisiana kids, but LSU usually gets those high-ranking DBs out of the state of Louisiana. But Brad Stewart looks like 6'5", 195. Going to use his official visits to Arizona State, Arkansas, and Florida. More than likely, he will be a Gator as well. So we'll see some more names. We'll talk about coming up what they'll do with visits coming up. There are good chances with Florida offensive line Caleb Chandler. Probably look at Louisville there. Defensive tackle Tyrone Truesdale. That's the kind of the mystery there. Florida, Louisville, Ole Miss. I think it's probably a Florida Louisville battle. They're 6'3", 325. Many have pegged him to be a Gator for a little while, but it's not a for sure thing. I still think Louisville will throw a lot at him. And if you had to ask me to pick now, I think he picks Florida because of the Florida's depth and help they need at defensive tackle. So Truesdale, I think it would be wise for him to come to a big-time program who turns defensive tackles into the NFL. Truesdale, I think it will be a Gator in the end there. One of the last player I'll talk about, and just because I think Florida has a really good chance with him, is the story of Levi Jones. This will be a good haul for Florida. He is out of Austin, Texas, linebacker. Florida State, Southern Cal will be vying for his services there. I think it's a Florida State battle. If you get down and look at it, 6'3", 215. Florida gets the first official visit coming up this weekend. He has a really good relationship with Randy Shannon, with his family dating back several years. And with Randy Shannon being elevated to the defensive coordinator, I really think that helps with Levi Jones. He's a really good playmaker from the state of Texas. It's going to be tough to win this recruiting battle, but I think his connection to Randy Shannon wins out in the end, and Florida gets Levi Jones. So that's just a little bit of predictions from some big-time guys that are coming up. We'll talk more about some other guys, but those are the ones I feel more comfortable with and ones that can help Florida the most. So Gators Breakdown, episode 35, a little bit of recruiting update, and we dove into Kemore Gamble and Kadeem Telfort, and I gave you a little bit of background about those guys and how they can fit into this Florida team. We'll get to see those guys in the spring as early enrollees, so it'll be exciting times for these Gators. So you can also go back on Gators Breakdown and look at some other recruiting profiles I've done. Daquan Green, Kadarius Toney, those guys. Kadarius Toney was also an early enrollee. So yeah, I mean, plenty there. You can go back and look at those. Some more in-depth recruiting info for those guys. So I'm David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. You can GatorDave_SEC. And you can find Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook. So for Gators Breakdown episode 35, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys later.